Welcome back to Ohio Counseling Conversations, the official podcast of the Ohio Counseling Association, bringing you updates and conversations from around the state. This month, we are joined by Wendy Nathan, a licensed professional clinical counselor and supervisor with over 30 years experience in the field of counseling and 15 years of experience supervising students and new therapists. Wendy was recently awarded Supervisor of the Year from the University of Toledo and Counselor of the Year from the Ohio Counseling Association. Wendy has a diverse counseling career working in a variety of different settings, including hospice, community mental health, higher education, and private practice. Wendy has her bachelor's degree in social work from Indiana University and a graduate degree in counseling from National Louis University. She's also a certified wellness coach, mindful dance instructor, and has EMDR 1 training. We are so excited to have Wendy today to talk about supervision and her new book, The Portable Supervisor, the essential guide for students and new mental health professionals. And as always, I'm your host today, Dr. Marisa Cargill, a counselor at Cuyahoga Community College and counselor educator at the University of Akron. Let's dig in. Welcome back to Ohio Counseling Conversations. Today we are joined by our lovely guest, Wendy Nathan, here to share with us a conversation about supervision and the importance of it and so much more, including the new book that she wrote. So Wendy, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Marissa.
Yeah,
I'm excited to be
we're
here.
so excited to have you. Yeah, so please, let's start off by just share a little bit about yourself and your background. We want to hear all about it.
Sure. Thank you. So, professionally speaking, I'm a licensed clinical counselor supervisor in the state of Ohio, and I've been practicing for over 30 years. For the last 15 years, I've been focusing on supervising and training graduate students and new LPCs. I'm also a certified wellness coach, and I'm also a mindful dance instructor. You had Jamie Marich on your program, and she was the one that
Yes.
me, yes, in mindful dance. Um, so my love has been the LGBTQAI population, and in particular, my practice for the last 8 years, I've been working with transgender clients, helping them transition. And I have
Mm.
absolutely loved that so much. But you can imagine, I've been in the field for over 30 years. So I've had quite a bit of training on so many different topics and so many different subjects. But
Yeah.
so that's a little bit about me. I have a social work background as well. And I don't know if you, I mean, personally, I am a mom and a wife and a mom to a dog and a cat.
Cat mom here.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay, well, awesome. So we're excited to have you. And, you know, first and foremost, thank you for serving the profession for this long. And because of that, I'm sure you've witnessed a lot of changes within the state and the profession as a whole. So excited to get your perspective on our conversation today and hear more about everything that you're working on. I know you recently wrote a book called The Portable Supervisor. For listeners who haven't read it, tell us about it. What was your intention in creating it, and just all about it?
Well, I'm really proud of this book. And my goal, of course, is to get it into the hands of students and new professionals, and actually even supervisors. So I began writing it as a project for myself when we were in lockdown from COVID. And I really thought of it as a manual for my interns. I realized that it could be really helpful to create a manual for them as they were coming in to counseling. And then it
Mhm.
dawned on me that this could be a book that could help others as well. And I realized that I had specific lessons I wanted to teach them that were additive to their graduate school experience. So I actually see this book working in internship courses as something that those who are teaching can use to help the students a lot more. So I'm pretty excited about that. But the idea is that I wanted to boost their knowledge and wisdom, give them specific guidance about philosophies that will help them grow, directions about courses to take after graduation, calm the ever present overwhelm when one begins counseling, and point them to theories to explore more deeply and how to use them in session. So I was hearing what was missing in graduate school classes. And as a
Mm-hmm.
supervisor, I really wanted to fill that gap. And so this book is
Yeah.
about filling the gap and, as I said, adding to the experience.
Huh, that's awesome. Um, I feel like we know or are taught that like people have to get supervisors, and it seems like okay, well that's just par for the course. That's something that we do. But it's a unique experience and a really important experience, and much like life in general, when it's good, it's great. But like when you don't have a good supervisor, it can be, very
Right.
impactful. What do you think really unique about the supervisory experience that maybe doesn't get talked about as much?
That's an excellent question, and thank you so much for asking it. I think the supervisory relationship ought to be thought of as a committed relationship, meaning the supervisor is a teacher, a role model, and dedicated to the growth of their intern or practicum student, or LPC, the new professional. And I don't see it as a flyby process. And oftentimes I'm worried that for a lot of students and new professionals, it's pretty hard for them to grab time with their supervisor. And
Yeah.
so I really see this as if you're going to become a supervisor, you ought to be really committed to that relationship because you
Yeah.
are you play such an important role in helping
Mhm.
that mentee of yours become an excellent professional. And the goal, of course, is to
Mhm.
help our clients move from their symptoms to goal achievement. And
Mhm.
if you're just kind of half in the relationship, that's really not, in my opinion, that's really not okay. So I think that the unique quality is your time and your commitment to you as a professional, to the people that you're working with, to your clients, to your profession, and taking it very seriously.
Mhm. Yeah, it takes a commitment, right? Just like you said, like this should be a committed relationship, and so you have to be able to give that space for this relationship, um, and take it seriously. So, what's some advice you have for new professionals going through supervision experience?
I would say interview your supervisor and find that person that's going to be committed to you and someone whom you respect. I would also say don't panic. um,
Yeah.
that your active listening skills and your healing presence is a intervention in and of itself, and that you will learn what you need to learn to become an excellent therapist if you dedicate yourself to becoming a lifelong learner. So, but as far as like going back to supervision, make sure that, I mean, this is something that is so critical to your development. So make sure that
Mhm.
you jibe with your supervisor and you find somebody that is going to help you. And if that person is not helpful to you, look for somebody else that's going to be helpful to you. Don't be afraid to move on.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. That's some good life advice
Yeah.
too. What are some common challenges like you feel like are part of the supervision experience?
Well, as I mentioned before, time. You want to make sure that you have time to give as a supervisor and time to receive as a supervisee. When I supervise,
Okay.
I start off, we're supposed to have that 1 hour, for every 20 hours. And I pretty much
Correct.
give 5 hours for every 1 hour, basically at the beginning. I spend a lot of time with my supervisees because I want to train them. I want them to learn. I want them to watch me. I want them to watch other professionals. So I think it's also really important that when you find a supervisor, you find somebody that's going to give you quite a bit of time, especially at the get go, to help you get off your
Mm.
feet. And the other thing is, you need to find a supervisor that's had good training. Now, I'm going to share with you, I was allowed to be a supervisor many years ago just by asking if I can be a supervisor. My training was, I said, both in social work and in counseling. And I really, my
Mhm.
social work license that I was using when I first started off in my career, I was working in hospice. And I had another social worker come in wanting to do her internship with hospice. And I just kind of asked the board, could I be a supervisor? And they said yes. So all I really had was my intelligence going in and, some years of experience. But I would like to see courses for supervisors to focus on what makes a great
Mhm.
supervisor rather than just talking about how you can get sued, because there is quite a bit of supervisory training that just kind of focuses on that. So I would like to see more courses on the development of the supervisee as they're coming in as a practicum student, as they're working toward becoming the professional that they hope to be and plan to be. So I would like to see more courses on the development of the supervisee. I also think that critical thinking skills courses and ethics discussion groups are very important. Now, you had Mike Desposito on the program, and he is a very good friend of mine, and he is now a business partner of mine. He and I are starting consultation groups for students, for new professionals, for professionals that have been in the field for a long time, and for supervisors.
Mhm.
And so we can continue the discussion, we continue to learn from one another and have a safe
Mhm.
space to ask the difficult questions. So I would love to see the supervisors reach out and contact us so we can start our supervisory group consultation. And what I'd love to see that we're going to work on is to see if we can turn that into obtaining CEUs for participation in something like that. So,
Yeah.
so it's time and dedication to, I'll come back to that, time and dedication to what you're doing and really reaching your supervisory goals. Like, what kind of supervisor do you
Yeah.
want to be? Right?
Mhm.
And what
Mhm.
resources are out there to help you grow as a supervisor, even outside
Yeah.
courses that you take.
I love this to hear that and that like people in the field know that there's just a lot of people who want the same things. And we may not all agree on everything, but that's part of consultation too, right? Like kind of digging through and seeing what works. And what works for you might be one thing, and what works for me might be another thing, but we have
Absolutely.
space to like bounce those ideas off of one another and support each other in those ways. Now, I will be very transparent. Our podcast team, we have people sort of run the gamut in terms of licensure, new professionals. And so, in developing these questions, some of these questions are actually developed by folks who are like in their internship experiences. And so, what is like maybe some advice you would give to like a supervisee who feels like they need to address a challenge with a supervisor?
Oh, that's a really good question. So, mm, so I'm going to go to my little Buddhist practice place and say, first of all, enter the conversation with intention, with compassion, and and finding your voice. So
Mm,
sometimes finding our voice can be very scary and could look like something that we actually don't want it to be, meaning we're more aggressive than we are assertive. So I would
yeah.
say take time to think about what you would like that you're not getting from the supervisory experience and try and be very
Mm,
specific, but practice it ahead of time. And maybe go to a friend and practice with them to see how it sounds. And
mhm.
understand that your supervisor is a person and they might have some challenges, right? They might have their own mental health challenges or struggles. So that's where you enter into this conversation with compassion for the other person. So as you are not personalizing what's happening to you. Okay.
Yeah.
So it would look like one of those I feel or I would like. And in the future, would you be okay to be able to provide this for me? And
Mhm.
in the book, actually, I wish I could flip to it very quickly, but I can't. I have actually very specific advice around that within my book about how to speak up when you're not getting for what you need. But it's okay to
Yeah.
ask for what you need and not be so afraid. And I know I was in that position years ago, and I've been in that position just in work life, that
Yeah.
being able to ask for what you need is not always easy, but it's really important. And
Mhm.
and if you enter into it w- in the right tone, with the right body posture, with the right attitude, the conversation
Mhm.
will hopefully go really well.
Yeah. And some almost like do your reflection of like how would I empower a client to do this? Right? Might be like how I have to think about how I'm doing some self-empowerment if I'm
Yeah.
the supervisee to
Mhm.
have this conversation that maybe I'm feeling really nervous about with my supervisor for sure. Yeah. So I wonder what you think about like characteristics or qualities that like a supervisor might be looking for in a supervisee as they develop. Or, alternatively, like that a supervisee might want to be looking for in a supervisor.
So I would expect, first of all, I would expect them to come in terrified, right? Like, oh my God, I'm just starting this experience. Ah. So, what I want to say to them, it's okay that you don't know. A great quality in a supervisee is somebody who wants to learn and grow and not be very defensive. So, somebody who can take feedback for the sake of growing. So that's my ideal. Somebody who's, of course, compassionate and is in this field for the right reasons. But I would love for my supervisee to say to me, Wendy, I have no idea what I'm doing. Can you please help me?
Mm,
And
yeah.
I would then like to create that safe space environment. And I would want supervisors to be able to create that safe space environment to be able to say, like, for them to feel comfortable coming to me and saying that, right? So that I could say,
Yeah.
okay, we've got this. Let's figure this out together and go through and discuss and process what's going on in the session and look at what's going well, where are some areas that they didn't think of that is an excellent
Yeah.
place to mine that information. So I would like the supervisor to not be all knowing, not be on an ego trip, but to also
Hmm.
be able to say, you know what, I don't know. Maybe we need to get some other input on this because even
Yeah.
I am not sure where to go with this. We might need another expert in here to give us some advice, right?
Yeah. My reaction when you were sharing that was like, we can't be the expert of all things. And so it's like a really humanistic way of saying, like, we're both like navigating this together, and that it's okay to not know, and feel safe and comfortable for either party
Yeah.
to acknowledge, and work and grow together to, get to solutions. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So as someone who, maybe is already in the field, or maybe like entering into the field, but knows that they want to be a supervisor, what do you think are like some of those important qualities that like they should be striving toward?
Do you mean as a supervisor? As they,
Yeah, like if I
yeah.
want to be a supervisor when I grow up, what should
Okay.
I be trying to focus on building in terms of like qualities that I can provide for my supervisees?
Well, one thing I would say is do a lot of reading of many different books just to become wiser. Because I think
Yeah.
we're called to be wise, rather
Mm.
not just as a supervisor, but also as a counselor, right? So
Yeah.
I would encourage you, of course, to take in what's around you and slowly, one step at a time, read some really good books that other people recommend that are going to help you with your knowledge base. I would also, I really am into various different Buddhist attitudes that I think
Mhm.
are incredibly helpful just as a human being, right?
Mhm.
So, for
Yeah.
example, beginner's mind, being curious, looking at the world as something interesting and new, looking at your clients as these amazing human beings that have showed up here to get some help, um, being curious about them. So, adopting that attitude of beginner's mind and being curious about the world, understanding that nothing is permanent, that we're not permanent, that, which is a big one, that we're not permanent. And actually, that's a piece of wisdom that really has impacted me quite a bit in my life. I told you I did some
Mhm.
hospice work when I was in my early years, and I saw young people die. And
Mhm.
and that really affected me. So I think about, like, while I'm on this earth, forever how long? Because I'm not permanent. How do I want to be in this world? How how can I be the best supervisor that I can be? How could I be the best therapist that I can be? So it's adopting that attitude as well. Radical acceptance. We see that in DBT, but it's also a great crossover for Buddhist practices and
Yeah.
ideas. And I just want to throw out
For
there for
sure.
people that might be freaking out about me talking about Buddhist stuff is that you don't have to be a Buddhist to learn from all of their wisdom. So
Mhm.
this isn't about being a Buddhist or pushing Buddhist Buddhism on other people. It's about learning from their amazing practices. And there are Buddhist therapists out there, but there is plenty of crossover. You'll see. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed this so far, but one of the things that I've seen is that as we're looking at different theories and different philosophies, there's a whole bunch of crossover and compatibility with one another.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you don't have to declare that you're one thing or another. You can really look at the synergy of all of the different
Right.
parts. And so radical acceptance is one of those that's a beautiful crossover,
For
right?
sure. I use it all the time,
Right?
both personally and professionally.
Right. So we
Yeah.
radically, there's so many things that we can radically accept, things that we know, things that we don't know, things that have happened in our lives. It's kind of the what is. So I would love,
Yeah.
in coming back to your question, I would love to see a supervisor that has done some work on themselves, has is in a place that they don't feel scared that they don't know it all, but are willing to
Mhm.
speak and get answers to the questions that they don't know.
Mhm.
Um, I would like them to be dedicated to their supervisee and understanding that this is an extension of the classroom. And
Yeah.
this is not just a flyby in the hallway, quick talk, yeah, kind of conversation, right?
Yeah.
I
It's
see,
active.
yes, it's an active training ground.
Yeah. Yeah. No passive allowed.
No passive
um,
allowed.
I love how you even like started answering that question, Wendy, because you said we're called to be wise, which I was like, okay, I think that might be the title of our episode, but maybe it should be the title of your next book. Because I feel like it's simple and it's catchy, yeah, but it's pretty profound in a lot of other ways. And um, what you shared after is also like even just us getting like as supervisors doing work on ourselves and that might require reading, right, but that might require our own counseling and
Absolutely.
all of those processes help us build greater wisdom.
Hmm.
And so I really like how you framed it. A, it's catchy, but B, I think it is really again quite profound there.
Thank
What are some highlights from the book that you feel like are going to help us be a little bit more wise?
All right. Thank you for asking that question. I'm actually going to open my book a little bit so that I can talk about it. So, in the first part of the book, I say we begin with you. And the first chapter, the first thing that I go into is you and your you-ness. Okay. And so, what I mean by that is we want to dig deep into what are the beautiful qualities that you bring to your your office, to your clients, right? Who are
Yeah.
you? I want you to use who you are. And that way you can be authentic and feel good about what's going on between you and your client. I remember when I first started off in the field, I felt like I needed to be Irvin Yalom. And if I wasn't Irvin Yalom, I was a failure. So,
Right.
and that was a lot of pressure. But you know what? I'm not Irvin Yalom. I never will be Irvin Yalom. I will be my version of me in my therapy session. So I want people to start digging in and feeling comfortable with who they are. And that is something I ask a whole bunch of questions in the book to help you dig deeper into who are you? What are the gifts that you bring with you? What are some of your
Mm,
strengths? What are
yeah.
some of your wise thoughts that you already have that you can bring in, right? what are some of the things that have happened to you in your life that you've reflected upon and made meaning from that have caused you to be a wiser person, and how you can bring that again into the session. I also talk about how to manage your overwhelm. And I
Mhm.
also talk about practical next steps. So in my book, I give you a guide as to what courses that you might want to consider taking next to help build your wisdom and your knowledge base. I also talk about um, what books you want to read. Like, for example, I'll throw out there, I think Emotional Agility is a fantastic book to read, that I think is like one of the number one books I would tell you to read on top of maybe Yalom's Gift of Therapy book.
Mhm.
Then I talk about supervision in the book and models of supervision. I personally kind of ascribe to the integrative developmental model of supervision, which means I like to work with my students and supervisees where they're at
Yeah.
and help them grow in the way that they would like to grow. And I look at what stage they're in and how we can move into the next phases where they're feeling a little more confident and a little bit more independent and thinking on their feet a little bit more. And then I talk about the artful practicalities of your practice. So I talk about the nuts, bolts, and guts of therapy. I talk about the treatment plan, case notes, um, what a counseling session ought to look like time wise. I talk about how all feelings are welcome. I talk about when it's not a good fit and what happens if you're not clicking with your client, what to do in those situations, what happens if your client gets mad at you. I talk about dream analysis. I talk about creativity in session. And then I move on to theories to explore more deeply. So I talk about the synergistic approach. I talk about strength based, existential, positive psychology, Buddhist wisdom, parts work, which comes from internal family systems
Yep.
and Janina Fisher's trauma informed stabilization treatment. And I don't think these things get talked about in your graduate school program.
Right. Yeah.
So this is the additive piece. And then I give you like 15 or 16 different intervention tools to use in sessions that you can learn and then use right away. Because clients are coming in. I want every client that comes in to learn coping strategies. I want to know what coping strategies they already have and utilize those, harness those. But also, there are amazing coping strategies that can help them in their life. And I want to see them resourced. So after session, if something comes up, they know that they're powerful and they can calm themselves down, right?
Yeah.
They've got some tools available to them. And then the last part of the book, I talk about, I've got these, what I call 7 superstar teachings. So things that I think you ought to know, like, for example, communication skills
Mm. Yeah.
that might not get taught, the trans theoretical model of change,
Oh, I
there,
love that.
the 5
You're in the
agreements,
crowd.
yeah, the 5 agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, Johari's window, conflict resolution, and 15 styles of distorted thinking. So, in a nutshell, that's the book, and that's what I.
Sounds like such an excellent tool that can be really, again, like practical, but also help folks with reflecting on like what works for them and who they are and what they bring to this profession as their unique self. So I love that approach, Wendy. It sounds like I must have to add something to my wish list for the holidays. So Switching gears a bit, um, what we've noticed happens quite a bit because we are human is a lot of our guests wear many hats, and that is something that sounds like is a very good theme in your life too, that you've worn hats with your coaching, counseling, now an author, supervisor, wife, mother. So I know you had shared with me you're semi-retired, so some of those hats may not come on as often as they used to. But how do you find balance and wellness amidst like the many hats life?
So I'm going to tell you that I am a Libra. And
Me
as
too.
woohoo! So I've been into balance my whole life. And it's actually something that's been very important to me throughout my counseling career. So I make sure that I have fun. And I am a huge proponent of silliness and fun. So I like to laugh, I like to dance. I have made it a priority for me that I get a massage once a month. I play Scrabble with a group of friends. I have been in a book club for 25 years with a wonderful group of women where it's more like it's a book club and a support group. We've been through so much together. Um, I make sure that I am whole and I am feeling well. And when I'm not, I make sure I get extra help via counseling or support from my family and friends to be able to pull myself back into that space of balance. So I am very much about self care and making sure that because we are dealing with heavy stuff every day, that we find a place where we can rest and be quiet. And it's different for each person how they restore themselves. But
Yeah,
I encourage my students and I encourage all listeners to make sure that it's just like brushing your teeth, it's a priority item. Just
yeah,
like getting enough sleep. Sleep is underrated. I make sure that I get enough sleep at night. Because I cannot, that's a foundational need, right?
yeah,
That we're exercising, that we are eating properly, that we're getting enough sleep so that we can handle our emotional day.
yeah,
Something else I do is I make sure that and I'm not always, I want to say that I'm not like super strict about this always, but I I do make it a practice to meditate, and I do make it a practice to ask myself, how do I want to feel today? Right?
yeah.
Rather than thinking about our to-do list, how do you want to feel? How do
Mm-hmm.
you want to feel after you're done listening to this podcast? What
Yeah,
would you like to welcome in? What are some of the attitudes or the emotions that you would like to feel? Would you
yeah.
would you like to feel energized? And what are
Mm-hmm.
some barriers to feeling that way? And exploring what maybe some of those barriers are.
Yeah.
And that is a practice, if you start your day balanced, it helps your day
Stay
remain and
balanced.
stay balanced. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And so this sort of transitions us into um, our thematic question we ask every episode because the name of the podcast is called Ohio Counseling Conversations. We want to know, like, what conversations do you think counseling professionals should be having with each other and or their clients right now?
Well, let's start with each other. I really think so. I've Mike and I have been in a group that we started years ago that we call Mosh Pit, and that's our group consultation.
Yeah, he mentioned it on his episode too. I'm like, I've heard of that before.
Yes, we call it mosh pit, and it's true that we might dance and listen to music at the beginning of our group supervision with one another. So I would say get in conversation. Don't be in a silo. So
Yeah,
get into conversation about case management, about ethics, about new ideas, about legislation, about how you can help your clients grow, about the latest research, and
yeah,
about self-care.
yeah.
We have been doing this once a month for 2 hours for probably 8 years now.
That's
And
awesome.
it has helped us to become better at what we do, to learn new insights and perspectives from one another.
Yeah,
Um, and so I would say get out of your office and into a group and
yeah,
have several different conversations.
yeah. I appreciate you saying that too, because I think um, certainly the work we do as counseling professionals is with other people, but it's not always with each other. It's with our clients, and obviously they deserve our attention, but to also not feel siloed and isolated, it's important that we connect with one another as well. Yeah, I love that. So,
Yeah,
um,
we can learn from one another. We really can. And
yeah,
if we're in a safe environment and a safe space, that's, of course, really important. And sometimes work is not that safe space.
yeah,
So find your peers and create a safe space to be able to share. And I also think this is part of your self care, right?
yeah. You feel less alone. People who
Yeah,
understand what your experience is like to some extent. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
Huh. So, because of your book and like the theme of the episode being supervision, what conversations do you think supervisors need to be having right now?
So I think, again, supervisors need to be talking to other supervisors, which, outside of an administration sort of way, but again, talking about the up and coming class of mental health professionals that are entering into the field. What could we be doing to help our students grow, sharing really good ideas with one another,
Hmm.
talking about ethics.
Yeah,
I think that that's a very important topic, and how we can also help our new professionals maintain good ethical boundaries.
yeah,
Because I know that that comes up quite a bit with our board
yep,
and the dings. But also, like, I mean, that would be a great place also for, again, our own wellness, and that we're not just like doing this all on our own. So
yeah,
I guess tell them, get into the conversation as well,
yeah,
and join a consultation group or make your own group of other supervisors where you can just sit and discuss what you see coming up
yeah.
uh, with clients and with your students.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think I like that answer.
So, out of our conversation today, is there anything that maybe we've not hit on that you wanted to make sure you shared?
I think you've asked me some really wonderful questions, and I think I've answered everything that, and said, I guess, everything that I want to say. So
Yeah,
thank
awesome.
you.
Well, we're going to make sure that we put your book and the other books mentioned in our show notes for today's episode so folks can gather those pretty easily. And I appreciate you so much for sharing your wisdom with us because, again, if we are called to be wise, it's important that we learn. And this podcast can help serve for that. So I'm so grateful that you helped our listeners learn today and you helped me learn today. So thank you so much, Wendy. We
Thank
are so
you.
happy to have had you.
Thank you
Awesome.
so much for having me on this podcast. It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. And we will catch you on the next episode. Tune in. Thanks.
Ohio Counseling Conversations is on a mission to make this podcast meaningful to you, and we can't do that without your help. A feedback form is linked in the show notes for this episode and is also available on the OCA linktree. If you have any recommendations for topics or guests or any other general feedback, you can let us know by using the form. We welcome your thoughts so that we can continue to develop the podcast and grow as creators. If you are interested in joining the team or being a guest, you can also reach us by emailing ohiocounselingconversations@gmail.com. We value your insight. Thank you so much for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to follow us so you can stay up to date with Ohio Counseling Conversations online and wherever you listen to podcasts.
This podcast is brought to you by the Ohio Counseling Association's Media, Public Relations, and Membership Committee and its podcast subcommittee. Views, beliefs, or references mentioned in this episode do not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by the Ohio Counseling Association. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the podcast does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Views and opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect the view of the Ohio Counseling Association or any of its officials. Thank you.